This lesson we want to talk about the subject of dating. And the first thing I want to deal with is some people might feel that, well, are we expecting too much of our young people? After all, they live in the world surrounded by temptation. Are we expecting too much of them when we say, in dating you need to remain pure and treat the other person right? And I guess the real question is, what does God expect of people who are young and dating? In Psalm 119, and in verse 9, it says, "How can a young man keep his way pure?" And I think a lot of people in our society would say, well, he can't. I mean, it's impossible. All young men are going to end up getting involved in things that are sinful. And the Bible doesn't have that sort of cynical attitude. The Bible asks the question, how can a young man keep his way pure? And then has an answer. It says, by keeping it according to thy word. In verse 11 it says, thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee. So it is possible for young people to live a pure, godly life. It is possible for young people to date and remain pure and act godly in those relationships. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1, it says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. And so that would be a passage directed towards young people. In the previous chapter, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and it says in verse 9, rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of your manhood. Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. Solomon is not telling a young man to kind of go out and do anything he wants, but he is saying, enjoy life, enjoy the things of this world, but do things that would pass the scrutiny of God's judgment. That is, live a good life, be happy, enjoy the things that this life has to offer you, but be wise enough to do those things that you would know that God would approve of and not condemn. So it is possible to have a wonderful life. It is possible to go through one's years of dating and have a lot of fun, and yet do it in a way that would pass God's scrutiny at the judgment day. And in this lesson we want to start talking about some practical things, some things that we should consider while we're dating and what God might expect of us. One of the first things I want to note is the importance of viewing the person you're dating as someone made in God's image. That is, you're not just dating another person, you're dating someone who has a soul. In the book of James chapter 3, James 3 and in verse 9, James complains that sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we bless God, and yet we use the very tongue that we bless God with to curse someone. Yet James says, curse someone who's made in the image of God. We need to remember that when we're dating someone who has a soul that's worth more than all the world contains. We're dating someone who has an eternal destiny, but we're also dating someone that's going to be somebody else's future husband or wife, future father or mother. We're dating someone who's going to stand before God one day in the judgment and have to answer for what they did in this life. We're dating someone that God wants saved, that God wants to see in heaven. And particularly, I want to talk about if you're dating another Christian. In the book of Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40, as I read Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40, I'm impressed that the way we treat a fellow brother or sister in Christ, God takes that very personally. Here's what Jesus said in this passage. The king will say to them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. That's one passage. Another one is Acts chapter 9 and verse 4, where we find that Jesus completely identifies with his people. And the thought that should come across there is that if we do something nice to a fellow brother or sister, we're doing it to Christ. If we do something rotten to a fellow brother or sister, we're doing it to Christ, is that Christ takes it personally. Acts chapter 9 verse 4, Jesus confronts Saul on the road to Damascus. Here's a man who is persecuting Christians. And Jesus said, "Why are you persecuting me?" Jesus says, "Yeah, I know you're persecuting my people, but you're persecuting me. I take that personally." That's something we need to contemplate, that the way I treat someone I'm dating, particularly if they're another Christian, that's the way I'm treating Christ. And so if I'm honorable with them and kind with them, well, then that's the way I'm treating Christ. If I'm deceitful with them and taking advantage of them, that's the way I'm treating Christ, and I'm going to have to answer to Christ one day about that. And so I hope as parents, and if you're a teenager here, I hope you don't say, "Well, I'm a teenager and God doesn't expect much of me." God expects a lot of you. God expects you to keep your way pure. Go back in the Old Testament. What did God expect Joseph, who was 17 or a little older at the time, what did God expect Joseph to do? Well, God expected Joseph not to sin against him and to resist the advances of Potiphar's wife. What did God expect Daniel to do? I mean, Daniel's taken away from his family when he's at a younger age. What did God expect Daniel to do when he's in Babylon, away from family, basically away from all his family influences? God expected Daniel to still keep God's laws, even the laws that some people might consider minor laws, or laws that were in things that maybe that didn't seem as important, like food laws in the Old Testament. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8. Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself, that is, eat food that the Old Testament said that he didn't have a right to eat. That's what God expected Daniel to do. And so I hope you don't sell yourself short and don't sell your kids short. In the book of John chapter 13, verse 34, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you love one another. By this all men will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another." That's the next verse. I think the great lesson there is that I know dating relationships in the world have a lot of turmoil and hard feelings, and people are hurt and crushed and devastated and things like that, but there must be a way that two Christians can date without that happening. There must be a way that two Christians can date without hurting one another, manipulating one another, or becoming immoral. God must expect something higher of those who profess to be his people. I like what Philippians chapter 2 and verse 3 says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind let each of you regard one another as more important than himself." And also in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 16 it says, "We ought to lay down our lives for the brethren." Consider those passages as far as the application they would have to the years, the time in your life when you're dating someone. And so I guess we want to try to, as Christians, date, but date with integrity, and date with honor, and date with purity. I know some people in the world may have the idea that if we can make it through the dating years without someone getting pregnant, we've survived or succeeded, and I think God has a lot higher standard than that. That seems to be kind of a bare minimum standard. I think God's standard is a lot higher than just avoiding the consequences of a sin. So I think he's not merely interested in the things that we avoid, but I think he's also interested in the things that you do. When you've dated someone, have you come out of that relationship stronger? Did you make them a stronger Christian? Can you still remain friends, or can you still be brotherly or sisterly towards one another? Do you still have the same spiritual goals? Can you look each other in the eye years later when you're married to somebody else? Did you conduct those years with honor, integrity, virtue, and purity? Well, I want to look at a couple practical things now. I wish, and maybe if you're older, you might wish the same thing. I want to talk about a few things that I wish that when I was a teenager, that maybe somebody had sat down with me, and hopefully I would have been willing to listen, and some lessons that they would have tried to get across to me. And one of them is the difference between real love and infatuation. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes infatuation feels more like love than real love feels like love. Remember that passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Love is patient. Love is kind, is not jealous, does not brag, is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own. It is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, it endures all things. That's real love. Now, infatuation may feel like love. And you might say, Mark, how do you know the difference? Well, here's just a couple of like little red flags. Here's a couple of things that I would think that if you're thinking this, it's probably more infatuation than genuine love. Often infatuation will say things like, I think I'm in love. Or, I can't believe what's happening to me. Or, I sure hope they notice me. Or, I pray that they will stop and they will talk to me. Or, are they looking at me right now? Often that's infatuation. Infatuation is really concerned about self and how self looks. I just have to find out. Would you go over there and ask them, have they been thinking about me or talking about me? That's more infatuation. Love is hardier. Love is very patient. You know a man or a woman loves you if they're not pressuring you to commit fornication. If they rather say, I can wait for you, and I'm willing to wait for you as long as possible. When someone is pressuring you, that's typically lust or infatuation, but it's not love. Remember, love is patient. When someone is extremely jealous, who are you talking to? That's lust or infatuation. Love wants the best for you. That's what love wants. Someone truly loves you when they want what is spiritually best for you, and they would be willing to sacrifice themselves. If that meant that you could either find someone better, or if what was in your soul's best interest would be served by that. Love never lies to you. Lust will. Love will not try to manipulate you. Lust will. Love is completely honest. Love is completely honest with you. Love doesn't try to impress you. Love is not going to brag about itself. Love will be humble. Love isn't going to try to come up and strut and be arrogant. That's not genuine love. Love, someone who always has to do what they want to do, and we got to go where I want to go, and we got to eat where I want to go. That's not love. Love is giving. Love is unselfish. Love will always tell you the truth. Love won't lie to you, like in verse 6. Love will never pressure you to sin or try to get you to move as close to the line of sin as possible. And in verse 7, love will wait. Love will endure. Love will endure. Second thing, don't waste your teenage years being infatuated about someone from a distance. That's not very meaningful or productive. We need to learn how to love people without expecting anything in return. That is how to serve people and help people and do good things for people. In your don't daydream your teenage years away, just hoping someone's going to come along and notice you. In the book of Titus, chapter 3 and verse 14, the Bible there says, "Let our people also learn to engage in good deeds, to meet pressing needs, that they may not be unfruitful." Stop thinking about, I hope somebody comes along, and stop saying things like, I'd only be happy if I only had a girlfriend or only had a boyfriend. Go out and do something. Don't waste your life. Go out and be productive. Find someone to serve. Find someone to help. Use your talents. Engage in good deeds. There's so much that can be done out there. Do it. Help your parents out and spend as much time with them as you can. Third, stop looking to people of the opposite sex or people of your own age to give you all your self-worth. Spend some time with older people who are wiser. Learn from them. What they can give you is far more valuable at times than any self-esteem that your peers can give you. What older people think about you, what your grandparents think about you, what your parents think about you, what older people that you respect think about you is far more important than what some 16-year-old girl or boy may think about you at the moment. Number 4, spend time cultivating and establishing non-romantic relationships with other people. You know, you're not going to find yourself feeling so blue if presently you don't have a girlfriend or boyfriend. And you're not going to spend hours wasting your time daydreaming about someone from afar if you've already got quality relationships with people, not only of your own age, but with older people. And you do things with them, you're learning from them, and they're just quality relationships that you just feel so much better after you spend time with them, that you learn so much. Number 5, it's okay to go through high school and not have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It doesn't mean you're weird or abnormal. That's okay. A lot of people go through high school without ever dating anyone seriously. And so don't think that somehow there's something strange about you if that's your case. Number 6, even the most sincere and dedicated girl or boyfriend gets dumped. That's not necessarily you. It hurts that I see young people agonize, young people who someone broke up with them, just agonize about what did I do wrong and what's wrong with me and what could I have done to prevent that, and all the time they agonize and daydream about trying to get the person back, and when there may have been nothing wrong with you. And that's one of the best things that could have ever happened to you, is for that relationship to end. Because if that would have translated into a marriage, you might have been absolutely miserable, or you might not have been available when the right person came along. Those relationships that end in high school or after high school, years later you may look back and say, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Remember, a dating relationship in our modern culture, in most cases, is going to be a temporary relationship. Understand that. Another way of making a distinction between infatuation and love is infatuation is all caught up in the newness of the relationship. So you're new to them. They want to find everything about you. But once they do, you'll find out whether it's love or infatuation, because once the newness wears off and you're kind of used to one another now, if it's infatuation, then the relationship will end, because they have to go on to a relationship that gives them that newness feeling again. If it's love, then the relationship will endure. In the book of Ephesians chapter 5, I want you to think about this of how could you, if you're a teenager, if you're in those dating years, what would be the best way to use your time right now? Ephesians 5 and verse 16 says, making the most of your time, because you're never going to have these years again. And kind of keep that in mind. What would be the best use of my time right now when I'm 16, 17, 18, 19? What would be the best use of that time? And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. Let me go to a couple more practical things. Let's go to while we're in the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, Ephesians 4 and in verse 25. There it says, therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we're members of one another. In the book of 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 1, it says, put away all guile, and guile is deception, lying, manipulating, not telling people the truth. So, one translation says, rid yourselves of all deceptiveness. That is, it's not okay to have a little bit of deceit in your life, or a little bit of guile. Or, well, I'm just only going to deceive that person. That's not okay with God. There is no tolerance. There's no tolerance for falsehood in the life of a Christian. Book of Proverbs, chapter 26, and in verse 19. I'll give you a little time to get there. Proverbs chapter 26, and in verse 19. And here's what the verse says. Verse 18, so like a madman who throws firebrands and arrows and death, so is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, was I not joking? God's not impressed by somebody who says, well, you weren't supposed to take me seriously. It was just a joke. It was just a joke. Someone who deceives people but later on comes back and says, what? What? I didn't mean any harm. You should have realized it was just supposed to be a joke. And God says, I'm not impressed by people who are always looking for escape clauses, or the idea of, well, I never ever meant any harm. Or I never thought. God says, you're not fooling anybody. Proverbs 12, verse 20. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace have joy. Deceit can also take on nonverbal forms, a tiny gesture that can lead the wrong impression. So, let me give you a couple practical things in dating. I think it's very important that you tell each other the truth in dating. Clearly talking about what are the expectations of the relationship? Is this a temporary relationship, or is this heading towards something else? Are you just friends or not? You see, if you tell someone, well, you're just friends. Let's say you're just hanging out with someone and you're just friends, and then you put your arm around them. Putting your arm around them typically means something more than just friends, and that's why I think in dating there needs to be honesty of, if a boy has told you, well, let's just be friends, and then there he is, and all of a sudden you're sitting together on the couch, he starts to put his arm around you, I think it's appropriate to say, I thought we were just friends. Now, you may want to be something more than friends, but I think it's good to clarify, what's this gesture mean? It seems like that you're communicating something to me that means that we're more than just friends. It's always good to have things out in the open. Again, remember the passages. Let's not lead each other on. Let's not deceive one another. Let's be clear about what this relationship is all about. A lot of times relationships end, and the reason there's so much hurt after they end is because some things were communicated either verbally or non-verbally. Some commitments were made verbally or non-verbally. And someone took those commitments seriously and someone didn't take the commitment seriously. So be upfront. I think one mistake that young men and women have in dating is maybe they're dating somebody and it's comfortable and they kind of like having someone to do something with on a Friday night. but they're really not in love with the person, but they really don't feel like breaking the relationship off, is because, well, that just at least gives them something to do on a Friday night or Saturday night. That's really not honest. You need to tell that person, I'm not really in love with you. And don't try to make love work. Like too many people, well, I really don't love them, I don't really have feelings for them, but maybe if I kind of hang in there and maybe eventually I will get feelings for them. Well, that's not fair to the other person if they think that you really do have feelings for them. So be honest. There's nothing to lose when you're honest in a relationship. The longer things go on under false assumptions, the more that somebody's going to get hurt in the end. Be careful about what you say when you're dating, as far as the commitments that you make. While we're in Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 6, many a man proclaims his own loyalty, but who can find a trustworthy man? Maybe you're a young woman listening to this and say, boy, is that true? I'm just tired of running into men that give me lines, that will say something like, call heaven, an angel must be missing. All these lines that men give you, and it just seems like I run into one liar after another. And Solomon says, yeah, there's a lot of guys out there who say, I'll be there for you, and who can find a trustworthy man? It's hard to find someone that will keep their word and will not lie to you. And right now I want to talk to young men. I know we live in a culture where people throw around the phrase, I love you. And I remember being in junior high school and high school, and girls would say, I love you, and but that's a powerful phrase, I love you. And even I think, even in high school, I know people say, I'll always be there for you, love you forever. And it doesn't mean that. Don't tell somebody that you're going to be there forever if you're not going to be there forever. Now you may be a parent saying, kids are going to say what they're going to say. But I think God takes what we say seriously. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36, that He's going to judge us for every idle word. And Ecclesiastes 5 says, don't make a vow. Don't make a vow unless you intend to keep it. Don't tell somebody that I'll be there for you forever, we're together, if you don't mean it, if you don't intend to keep that promise. Sometimes mothers tell their daughters things, and one of them is that, anything that a guy tells you after midnight doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. It doesn't mean anything. Usually whatever a guy's trying to tell you after midnight is he's trying to get something that he shouldn't have. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything a guy tells you after midnight. And that's sad in our culture, in our society. We don't want to give people the wrong impression. We don't want to mislead them. We don't want to distract them from spiritual pursuits. So be careful with your words. If I'm dating somebody, I'd be very careful about telling them that I love them. Unless I really think this is the one. Just seems to me in our culture that we throw around the word love so carelessly. So carelessly. If you like them, tell them you like them. If you enjoy spending time with them, tell them that. I just think love is something different, something far different, and something far more seriously. I don't want to date somebody and just break their heart. I want to practice Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12. I want to treat people the way that I want to be treated. I don't want a woman telling me that she loves me when she doesn't. I don't want her telling me that I'll be there forever when she's not going to be there forever. However you want people to treat you, so treat them. That's Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12. Also, be careful about giving your heart away to somebody. You don't want to give your heart away to somebody if you're not always going to be with them. Be careful about the things you tell someone in a casual dating relationship. Be careful about pouring your heart out to somebody when you don't even know if they're going to be here a week or a month from now. Be careful about the strings that you start attaching with this other person, the romantic strings, if they're just not going to be around in the near future. As we're talking about speech, let's talk about some wholesome speech. In the book of Psalms, Psalm 141. Psalm 141, and we're going to look at verse 3. Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. I like that verse. God, I need some help. I need some help controlling my tongue and watching what I say. In the book of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, Ephesians 4:29, let no unwholesome word proceed out of your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of moment, that it may give grace, spiritual strength, to the person who hears. Ephesians 5, while we're in the book of Ephesians 5:4, there must be no silly filthiness and silly talk. Don't misunderstand the writer. Silly talk is not good, clean jokes and things like that. Silly talk is in the context of filthiness and coarse jesting. It's in the category of things that are not fitting. It's in the category of, and the word there, suggestive jesting. All right, here's what I want to talk to you about. We have no business in a dating relationship talking to another person about our wayward desires. It is not wise when you're dating someone to tell them, boy, every time I see you I go weak in the knees, or I'm just having a hard time controlling myself and keep my hands off you. That's the dumbest thing in the world to say. Because what you're doing is you're advertising. If you're a young man or a young woman and you're dating someone and they tell you, I'm having a hard time right now controlling myself, I'm just being honest, I'm just pouring out my heart to you, and that sounds so spiritual, and it's not. What they're doing is they're advertising. What they're doing is that they're saying, if you want to make a move, the door's open. If you want to make a move, it's open season here. If you want to make a move on me, I'm not going to resist you. And that's the last thing you need to hear. And so I think people try to think, well, I'm just being honest, just pouring out my heart. No, that's not honesty. It's temptation. It's enticement. You're advertising. If someone says that to you, you need to say, well, then we need to take a break here, and we need to distance ourselves, and I need to take you home, and because this isn't healthy. This isn't healthy. I just want to tell you, and maybe you've said that and said, well, I didn't intend anything wrong, and well, maybe you're that naive. Okay, I'm not gonna condemn you for that. But what I'm just saying is that one, and it's not true in every case, but typically when someone says that to you, they're testing the water, and they're on a fishing expedition, is what they're doing. And what they're saying to you, they're not saying to you overtly, let's make out, but behind the scenes, that's what they're saying to you. I wouldn't mind if we did this right now. That's a very shrewd, cunning way to advertise. Yeah, and what I guess what they're wanting to do is kind of they're saying temptation is at the door, and I'm just kind of going to sit here and wait and see what happens. And I'm not going to flee. We have the responsibility to flee. 2 Timothy 2, verse 22, flee youthful lusts. We should never try to tempt one another. Now remember, that's somebody's soul there. That's somebody's soul. We should try to strengthen each other, build up one another. Book of Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. There the text says, we urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with all men. We need to help one another. And also, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, if you're going to spend time with someone, then let's make sure that we spend time that builds us up. Whatever, brethren, is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, good repute, any excellence, anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. The dating years, yeah, have fun and do things, but the dating years are also years that you would hope that whoever you dated, and after that relationship ended, that they could say, because I dated them, I'm stronger now. I'm a more knowledgeable Christian now. I'm a stronger person now. I have greater character now. Not that I have less, or I'm weaker now. We want to date in such a way that after the dates are over, that people walk away kind of going, I feel better about myself. I feel that I have a greater resistance to temptation now. I feel I'm spiritually stronger now. That person really has rubbed off me in a positive way. I'm wiser now. I think I'm more mature after that relationship. Not that I'm weaker, and not that I'm devastated, and not that I'm more vulnerable, but I'm stronger. I think it would be good if two people are going to date to say, can we make a commitment here? Can we make a commitment that no matter that, whether this relationship survives or does not, that whatever the end result is, that at least the time that we spent together is spiritually uplifting time, and that we're both stronger in the end. Can we make a commitment now that we will only do those things that will be in the eternal best interest of the other person? Be careful, though. Be careful about dating someone who pretends to be interested in, oh yeah, I'll study the Bible with you. Oh yeah, I'll pray together with you. Because there are some people that will do that, but they really want something else. Jude said, certain persons have crept in unnoticed. Those who were long beforehand marked out for this condemnation, ungodly persons, who turn the grace of our God into licentiousness. And you might say, Mark, how do I know? How do I know? How do I know whether I run into a woman or a man that is genuine or not? What would be some red flags? I mean, if they're interested in Bible study and prayer and things like that, how do I know? And I don't have all the answers, but here are some things. Number one, have them meet your family. I think that's the first rule. I'm not going to date anyone who's not willing to meet my family. All right? Before we go out on our first date, they will meet my family, and I'll let mom and dad, if I got an older brother, an older sister, I'll let them grill them. And I'm not going to stand in the way. And I'm not going to say, oh, Dad, Mom, would you take it easy on them tonight? No, I don't want Mom and Dad taking easy on them. I want Mom and Dad asking those questions like, what's your intentions, young man? Or what are you going to do for a living? Or what plans do you have for the future? I want to see what this person is made of. And I don't make the mistake of trying to protect them and run interference for them. Let your mom and dad, and I want to see how they hold up under the scrutiny of the family. Are they going to crack? Will that expose them as a poser and a fake and a flake? Or will they come off pretty good? I want the family to interview them. Secondly, I'm going to take them to my spiritual family. That is, before I date them, I'm going to say, well, I have a relationship with God. I go to services. I want them to come to church with me, come to services with me. And I want them to meet my brethren. I want them to come out and interact with some Christians. And I want to see how they hold up. I want some of the more knowledgeable people in the congregation, taking a look at them, sizing them up. I want some of the mature women or men in the congregation kind of looking at them and tell you what, nobody better than your brethren to spot a fake than someone who's been married for 20 or 30 years. And if after you bring them to services, maybe you go out and some sister or brother comes up to you and say, can I talk to you? They might say, I really like that person you brought. I really like them. Or they might say, Mark, I just got a bad feeling about them. I can't quite. Don't discount that. Don't ignore it. Put some stock in what older, mature Christians, the impression they get from someone that you're dating. All right? Don't get mad. Don't try to defend them. Oh, I'm insulted and there's nothing wrong with Johnny or whatever. No, don't. If someone says, can I talk to you? There's a couple things that bothered me about them when I talked to them at dinner. And here they are. Don't discount that. Okay, that's valuable information. Valuable information. Also, if they're not a Christian, see how they react to a Bible study. Now, not just a Bible study in anything, a Bible study about becoming a Christian. Look at, and if you have it with the preacher, look at how they respond to the preacher, but here's the thing to put stock in. After you two leave wherever the Bible study was, what does he or she say about the study? Listen carefully. If they kind of mock the preacher, if they kind of mock the subject matter, red flag, red flag. If they have a lot of yeah buts, if they're trying to convince you otherwise of the truth, all right? Red flags, red flags. Here's something else. When you're dating someone, how do they treat their own mom and dad? If they treat their mom and dad with disrespect, you get into a marriage with them, they're going to treat you with disrespect. The way a man treats his mother is the way he's going to treat you. The way a woman treats her mother or father is the way they're going to treat you in the marriage. All right? Another one. How do they treat their brethren? Let's say you're dating a Christian. How do they talk about their brethren in private? If they're talking bad about Christians behind their backs, that's a red flag. If they're talking bad about the elders or the preacher behind their backs, all right? How do they talk about the Bible? How do they talk about God and doctrine? Are they trying to convince you to get as close to the line of sin as can be without sinning? Are they trying to convince you of things that are not true? That's a red flag. All right? That's a red flag. Or, do you feel spiritually safe with them? That is, does it look like they have a good head on their shoulders? Do you know that? How do they talk about the sermon after Sunday morning when you're going out to eat? How do they talk about it? Are they saying, I don't think I agree with that, or I think that's overboard, or I don't think that's right? Okay, are they mocking God's word, or are they saying, that was a real good point? That was a good point he made. Do they speak with wisdom? What do they do with their spare time? Are they trying to use all their spare time for themselves or God? If someone needs to be moved, or do they try to get out of it? I want to do what I want to do that day. Or do they help? If there's some sort of gospel meeting or a group meeting or someone needs help, do they want to do what they want to do that day? Or they say, you know what, why don't we go out? Why don't we go out and have dinner later on? But in the morning, I think we need to help that family. Are they a giver? All right, here's something else. that you should look for. How are they about their commitments? Do they try to wiggle out of commitments? Are they always trying to make excuses? Are they like sleeping in late? Are they always late to appointments? Can they hold a job? Or if they get fired or laid off, is it always somebody's fault? All right? How do they deal with like things like that? Do they keep their word with people? Do they take their commitments seriously? Or does it look like that the person they're interested in the most is themselves? What's their track record? What's been their track record with other relationships and other people? How have they treated other people? They borrowed money from people and never paid them back? Have they kind of jumped from one job to another? Does it look like they've always been one step ahead of the bill collectors or whatever it may be? Are they a person of integrity? Do they keep their word? The last thing that I want to talk about here a little bit is the idea of privacy. Sometimes people say, well, we've got to get to know one another. And you know what? You can get to know somebody great in the middle of a group, walking down a sidewalk, walking down the street, sitting in a room where the door's open, where another person can walk in at any time. Privacy, getting to know someone, does not require that you're alone, in a dark car, in a locked room, in an empty apartment or empty house with nobody around. You don't need that when you're dating. You don't have to have that to get to know someone. The longer two dating people spend together with nobody around, that discharges your moral batteries. All right? When you're dating, don't allow yourselves to be alone for long periods of time without any sort of accountability. If you're dating someone who's always trying to get along with you, I think that's a red flag. I would have a lot more confidence in someone who would say, you know what, I don't think this is good. I think when we're dating, I would try to be in situations where there's always somebody else there, or at least can see us. But if you're dating someone and they're always trying to work things out where you're in an apartment alone, or it gets the sense that they're always trying to maneuver things like that, that's a red flag. They're up to no good. Now, I want to stop right there. This is not going to be our only lesson on dating, but this is the first one, and I hope you find these things helpful. You got any questions? If you have some things in this series that we don't cover, you can always give us a call, 503-644-9017, and say, Mark, would you deal with this aspect of dating? And I'll try to do the best I can. These lessons, some of these lessons are online at www.beavertonchurchofchrist.net. Thank you.